Greetings, weary travelers. Come, warm yourself by the fire, and let us regale you with mighty tales, tales of adventure, tales of heroism, and of course, tales of Tamriel. I am your host, LotusOfDoom, here for episode 290 of Tales of Tamriel, and I have the pleasure of this week being joined by TESBenefactor from the Imperial Library itself. How you doing, Benefactor?
Doing well, very well today, and I'm happy to be here on the show and to be able to talk about all this with you.
Great. We've kind of had this like in the works for a while, along with most of the things I've been trying to do, so I'm glad that this is the discussion I specifically wanted you here for, as you are more well-versed in some of the esoteric ones in the series than I am, as well as being a fellow collector, as we have very similar backgrounds for anybody watching the video.
Oh, definitely. I'm always impressed with your collection that you have, and compared to mine, it's very similar, and we're right up the same alley.
I know. I actually really like the fact that even our bookshelves are incredibly similar, which is kind of funny. All right, so kicking things off this week, we are going to dive into, we'll start things off with news, because there actually is a little bit of ESO news. This, what with Benefactor being here this week, we're going to kind of cover all of the series in general, as opposed to just ESO. And, you know, we've been covering different portions of the series and stuff like that the last couple of weeks, but we're going to kind of address the news and then kind of look at the whole series in its entirety this week, since we have the benefit of somebody else who has played through games like Shadowkey and Battlespire and all that stuff. So it'll be nice to actually have someone to bounce stuff off of, as opposed to me trying to give my rendition of what happened in all of these scenarios, which will be kind of be unique for me, at least.
We're definitely two of the people who have played pretty much almost every Elder Scrolls game. I've played every single one to completion. I know you still have a few under your belt that you're looking to do in the future.
Yes. That and that's why it's kind of funny. Like, you've actually tackled the couple that I haven't yet as well, not to mention the fact that for everybody who is amused by some of these like dumpster fire live streams of some of the older games that I do, one of the people who has probably been the most influential helping me get these things up and running is actually you, Benefactor, with some of the links you sent me and resources. That's the reason I can stream some of these games, is some of the stuff you've managed to link me into, which I appreciate.
I'm definitely going to, if you need help whenever you start the next game, just reach out. I'm going to be there for you.
Perfect. Appreciate it. And all right, so we will start things off with the Elder Scrolls Online official studio director's letter, the 2021 retrospective, written by Matt Fryer. I'm not going to read the letter verbatim. It's available on Twitter. It's available on their main website. There's lots of places you can check it out. It's a kind of become a yearly tradition that ESO and ZeniMax Online Studios gives us kind of like a recap of the year from their perspective, and kind of like a shout out back to the players and everything like that. And personally, one of the things that I've always liked about it is the fact that it's kind of a peculiar thing for companies to, everybody likes to sell what they're selling. Like, and that's totally fine. Their businesses, I get it. And they definitely sell their high points. But when they have like mess ups, hiccups, whatever the case, they also include that. It's like, it comes across as way more genuine rather than just a PR move. So that's kind of why I personally like hearing it each year, because nothing about the letter is just like, oh, these are all the great things we did. Okay, hopefully we'll be even better next year. It's like, yeah, there's that. But then it was like, you know, they get into the fact that they're still working from home. Amazingly, we were talking about it before the show. They somehow keep hitting their 4-quarter deadlines within like a week or so. It's mind-boggling. Like, I don't get it. I don't get how they haven't been held up without like working themselves literally to death doing this. So
definitely, and every year I look forward to this letter coming from them, as it gives us a peek into how the year has been for them, with they're continually able to bring us content, 4 different pieces of content a year, which is amazing for an MMO. And with that, they're able to, even though they're facing challenges, they give us an insight of what those challenges are within this letter, and also be able to show us that the human side that we don't always get to see when it comes to developers.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. It's yeah. Basically, I just mimicked that. I don't really have anything to even add. That's very much yeah. I totally agree with that. So I definitely the reason I bring it up, other than I do suggest you reading it for yourself if you're part of the ESO community, or if you're not and you're just interested in it, definitely take a look. It's a very nice letter that's addressed to us this year. But the big thing that I feel is worth getting into, and just to give everybody a heads up in advance, we will not be spoiling anything with the current season, like main plot spoilers or anything like that. And we also, there's talk of some potential stuff being leaked. We will not be addressing that either, because one, it's unreliable, like it's unregulated, so we're not going to get into that stuff, and also we don't want to ruin stuff like that going forward either. But one part of this that they mentioned is the looking forward section, which I actually will kind of reference for everybody. So, quoted from the article, looking ahead to 2022, we will continue to do what we do best, tell great stories, and keep the ESO train running. Our content plans will be we'll back off major plots with end-of-the-world invasion themes for a bit, to tell a traditional Elder Scrolls story of political intrigue and faction infighting, concentrating on one of ESO's playable races that has not yet had a full cultural and historical deep dive. For more information, you'll have to wait to the traditional January reveal show, which I personally have loved the Daedric Invasions. I know it's had mixed results. A lot of people do really enjoy the Daedric Invasions, but there is a degree of fatigue where people are like, yes, if every scenario is the end of the world, it starts losing its impact. And I definitely understand that, as much as I like those, but I like the variety that they're implying here, especially because this makes me think of the first quote-unquote chapter, but it wasn't called a chapter at the time, with Hrothgar and the orc political intrigue and everything like that. So I am really, really hyped for this. I don't know about you.
I'm very hyped for it. Political intrigue is what originally got me into the Elder Scrolls series. The infighting between different factions and backstabbing and everything like that is what I'm hoping that we get a really good content with. Going back to Arsenium, I feel like it's still one of the top zones that you can play. If anybody out there has not played Arsenium yet, you need to play Arsenium. And I will say that it's the best zone of the game, and it's partly because of the political intrigue. Even though you have other things going on with other chapters to where you have the end of the world threat, with the political side, you have something that you can really relate to more, as we deal with that in our own world as well. And I feel like that makes it a stronger connection to be able to feel what's going on with the world. It makes it more believable as a world.
Again, I'm definitely going to have to echo that. I think you're right. You've got these world-ending threats and Daedric invasions and all these super, super over-the-top ultra hero moments, which is definitely fun and a strong point of the series. But kind of to your point, having something be more grounded in a little more relatable situation, as surprise, politics are around us all the time, for better or worse. So the series, as much as people oftentimes will say oh, I don't want politics in my video games, which a lot of people use it for escapism, and I totally get that. However, the Elder Scrolls series is not a place to go if you do not want political intrigue. A lot of it mirrors, parallels, or is satire of our own world. There's no two ways about it. That's how it's written. That's how it's been kind of written since it established itself as a story. Elder Scrolls One Arena, not as much, but once Daggerfall, from what I have seen of Daggerfall, once it started to establish itself, it definitely made sure that there were parallels to our real world, and it definitely can help ground you in between these epic world-changing events as well, which I like. It gives you some variety. It also gives a different flavor of experience, because again, there's over 19 million people who have played Elder Scrolls Online. It's a lot of different flavors of interest to kind of hit on, so we haven't had one of these quite so much since base game / Hrothgar. So it'll be nice to kind of readdress something like that and have more of a small scale backstabbing thing, as opposed to like, okay, here comes the next giant doom situation with, gods coming in to mess us all up. The other thing that I'm very curious on, and we threw out the question on Twitter just to get people's responses. We had a decent amount of you respond, but without going into, not that really, I feel either I totally missed something or they knew that we were getting onto them. Where do you think we might be going for this? Because it's an established race. What are you thinking, Benefactor? Do you have a gauge? What do you like to see?
With an established race, I want to see more Redguard content. That's what I'm hoping for, because Redguard content, you have a lot of different. If you look in the lore, you have the Regatta, which first came over. Then you have they're split into several different factions. You have the royalty factions and the other factions. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but with those factions, I think it could create a really great political story.
Yeah, to echo that, I think, are you referring to like the Crowns and the Forebears type of thing that we got?
Yes,
yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's so funny because that's exactly it, is we get just a little taste of that in the Alakir Desert with the Daggerfall Covenant storyline. And I really, really liked it from what we got to see, but it didn't go super deep, which they've kind of implied in this article that's kind of the gauge. And the series in general hasn't had a lot to do with filling in that situation. And the two groups are interestingly opposed into kind of like the old world values versus like the new accepting, like, okay, we're the progressive group kind of blending in with the new culture that we've moved to on Tamriel, whereas, you've got the previous where it's like, no, these are our traditional values, and this is, so it's also very interesting because, again, paralleling a lot of stuff in real world situations. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I as well really do want to see the Redguard situation. It seems likely they're going to be in the Daggerfall Covenant. Both EP and AD have had several expansions now.
Oh, definitely. And I'm looking forward to the Daggerfall Covenant getting some love finally. It hasn't had an expansion in it since Orsenia.
Right.
And with that, there's plenty of Hammerfell that they can be able to cover. So that seems like a likely scenario for what I believe.
Yes, and it's kind of funny. It's brought up in chat as well. Breton is another culture from the Daggerfall Covenant that hasn't. They've been covered, and I would definitely like to see more. But my first choice is also I would really like to see more with the Redguard. The other thing is the Redguard have more of their region that still needs to kind of be unlocked on the ESO world map, where High Rock is a little more covered for the most part. It's much more fleshed out. There's definitely more to work with their storylines. But the Redguard, you have regional additions to the game, as well as having like the background to their culture and stuff like that I'd really like explored. So my assumption is also going to be Redguard. But the thing that I kind of made reference to earlier, which I don't know if I just missed it. I haven't completed all the side quests. I did just recently, which we'll get into later on in Tales. I just was finishing up earlier today the Deadlands quest. I haven't done the epilogue yet. I almost said prologue, which would be weird. I haven't done the epilogue yet. But I'm finishing up the main storyline, which is I really enjoyed, but again, I can deal with that later. However, much like we've mentioned before, that the mechanics to the game are kind of slowly breadcrumbed to you along the way. Over the years, they've kind of given us, whether we've seen it or not, an indication where we're going next. If they did this time, I totally whiffed on it. Like, I do not, like, outside this letter, I would have zero idea where the series was going next year.
I originally thought that the letter that you get from the guard that is at, what's the name of the fort? There's a fort within Blackwood that you go to that you infiltrate. The leader of that fort has a letter that mentions several locations. My original thought was that one of those locations were going to be what we're going to go next. But most of those locations would point to a Nordic type of location or an Imperial. But we've already had both the Nordic cultures and the Imperial cultures covered, which leaves me flabbergasted on where exactly we're going next.
Yeah, it's same situation. Like, I actually know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, it would, other than as much as, you know, we've recently had several episodes on on Skyrim, with the anniversary edition recently dropping, and we've been doing a deep dive with Skyrim on characters recently on the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, which I'm also guest host on, or co-host on, with Tom over at Robots Radio. Plug. But a lot, like, the Skyrim, like, if we were to go back to Skyrim after a 1-year break from Skyrim, I feel like, yes, there's still more. We haven't seen Whiterun. We still haven't seen the college. I feel like people would get Skyrim fatigue at that point. Like, I feel like we need a longer break before we can address that again, because the Skyrim meme is strong anyways. But if they have like a literal 1-year break from the Skyrim chapter to then go back to Skyrim, I think that'd be way too much. So, like, yeah. Plus, like you said, they're already kind of, like, we've done so much with them. There's not the same degree of mystery the same way there is with the Redguards.
I agree completely, and that's where I'm really hoping for more Redguard lore and to be able to dive into the history of them, what they were like in Yokuda before.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know. So either they were cagier and stealthier this time with giving us clues, and it might make sense later on, or yeah, I just totally missed them this time. I'd be surprised if not only just me, like, I'll definitely say, like, oh, okay, I can totally miss stuff, but it seems odd that so many in the community, because it's very rare that nobody catches something. Like, somebody always gets a, like, little, it's like, ooh, I don't know about this. This seems like this could be going somewhere. So with a lot of it being like people's personal speculation and it all being spurred by the year-end letter, it's kind of, I'd be shocked if there was something. So I'm wondering if maybe they wanted to keep it secret this time, or, you know, something along those lines, because again, the spoiler stuff it's a mixed bag. Like, it's fun to speculate, but then at the same time, if everything gets leaked early, you get these fun reveals that they do, and it's kind of like, oh man, the wind goes out of your sails a little bit if everybody figured it out, like, substantially before everything. Because we had inklings of what was coming with the Greymore chapter, which I was going to say, you were at ESO Vegas with me before the world exploded and shut down. But yeah, there was like all that speculation going in that. And when we walked into the I don't know what you call it, amphitheater auditorium where it was, and we had like the fake snow raining down and stuff like that, and we could see Solitude, it was like, oh, holy crap, it's like people were picking out like what parts they were right about, what parts they weren't right about, and it was so much fun.
With those, we're always going to be looking back to the previous chapters whenever a new one comes out. That's one thing that I always love doing, is revisiting a previous chapter when a new one comes out, so that I can be able to spot those clues that I didn't spot before that hint at the next content. There's always something there that they hint at, but it's never obvious until once you have the next chapter.
Yeah, it's one of those hindsight is 2020 things fully, when you're like, oh my god, that's so obvious now that it's there. It's like, how did we not piece that together? And whenever I've been, because I've been included in some of them, but they do these promo things. I know you have as well. Some of these promo things they do to hype up the chapter as well, is so cool because it gets the whole community in a buzz about trying to figure out how to do these things. The maps I thought were exceptionally creative, the way you could overlay them. That was very, very cool. And I actually remember you were translating the Daedric on the sides of the things as people posted them. So that type of thing is awesome. The coins last year with the letter, and it was like, oh, this is indication of, the different Dagonist clans of Dremor. And I'm like, oh my god, these are so creative the way they do that. And just as a side note, because again, as somebody who was part of the community for this for a long time before I did any of this like making stuff, I just choose Zos and like Bethesda as a whole, shouting them out. I really like the fact that they have been selling these things in the store for people who are not included in the promotional thing, because prior to me ever being included in any of the promotional stuff, it's definitely kind of like a FOMO thing. It's like, oh man, that's really cool. Like, I wish I could have something to do with that. And I don't need it to just be like, oh, gimme stuff. But like, if you're a collector, which we'll get into the fact that if you're not on the video version of the show, we're both blatantly Elder Scrolls memorabilia collectors. Just being able to get that stuff from the Bethesda store, I personally really appreciate for anything that I might not be included in. Knowing that I could get it if I really would like it, I think is personally a really cool thing they've started to do, and I'm glad they did, making it available. So you don't have to be a quote-unquote influencer or content creator or whatever. It's neat to give everybody that shot, because some of this stuff is really, really cool. So I hope they keep doing that.
I agree completely with this, to where it allows those people that see what the influencers or content creators are able to get, and they're able to get a hold of the same items and be able to feel like they weren't left out. If you look at other franchises, you will see that they don't support their community in the same way. They don't offer those same promotional items to the broader community, and that's something that ESO, I feel, they don't let their community off as well. They actually allow them to be able to get the same items.
Yeah, and again, if you do like collecting this stuff, I mean, anybody who's been to any of my extended like charity marathon streams or anything like that, the stuff I give away, like the collector's coins and stuff like that, I got my own when I went to these events. Like, side shout out to like just specifically the community manager, Gina Bruno, who pretty much everybody knows anyways. She provided me the majority of the stuff I get to give to all of you. Like, and it wasn't like, I'm not this like super elaborate streamer or anything like that. The joke is that Rich Lambert actually streams like 10 times more than me every month. And he makes the game. So it's like, wow, okay, I can't even find enough time to do that. And I don't even make this. But I love having that connection where we can give this stuff away. So it's like the fact that they make it accessible, and, pricing and stuff like that aside, we've ripped on their shipping and stuff like that. It's pretty brutal. I mean, as I recently learned from this Extra Life event, shipping's just brutal in general, because when I saw the bill for shipping the stuff out to all the winners, I was like, oh dear God. So, that's partly on the postal service. But that aside, it's just neat that you can have these abilities to be included if you want to and have the means to, which I do like. It personally has been really, really cool to see, as somebody who's kind of been on both sides of like, the dev team knows who I am, as opposed to before when the dev team had no idea who the hell I was. So it's like, it's just nice that everybody can have that option. Even if it just comes like a little later on, because again, never need to be the first to get something. Like, if I'm not included in this next one, hopefully it's in the store. I'll be happy to get it. Like, it's neat to add to my collection as a memory from that year of a game that I love. So
I agree completely. And I will want to say that what I'm hoping for is that this year there's some kind of puzzle for the community to come together to be able to solve. I love when there's something mysterious about it and it brings the community together to speculate about the upcoming future. As I feel like sometimes we go a little bit overboard and off the wall with our speculations, but it's all good fun.
Yeah, I only like to bring up the very few times that I am correct about things, and people are like, oh my God, like the one that I will literally never let anybody forget is the fact that prior to Elsewhere, I made the joke about, well, maybe it's Naphalargus, and I was like, most people won't even know who this character is, but we were just literally throwing names of dragons out, and when it actually turned out that Naffy was part of the chapter, I was like, oh my God, I actually got something. That was one of 40 things I got wrong. I got like one right. But I like to just say that, hey, I got that one right. So yeah, those speculations are super fun, even when more than half the time we have absolutely no idea what we're talking about. All right. So that's kind of our news bit. Well, actually, that's the important news bit. There is a secondary news bit, which is just worth mentioning, as I believe it will. I don't even know what the date is. Yeah, it'll be live by the next time we have a show. So on Thursday, December 16th, at 10 a.m. Eastern, the New Life Festival will be kicking off again for the year, which is double XP, there's unlocks. This is, there are a lot of quests added to the game via this that lets you see each of the regions, kind of like the cultures as we were talking about. Each one has their own holiday-themed quest. I'm not going to... This is an event that's happened many years in a row at this point. They've added some new collectibles, including carved Nordic armor, it looks like, as a new style, which I know Ark will be very pleased about because more Nord. But yeah, that is kicking off December 16th at 10 a.m. Eastern. So this is a great time to get levels, get CP, get yourself some collectibles. There's a crystal frost screen. Tons and tons of options to get the event tickets, so you can buy whatever it is you would like to buy with your event tickets. All of the previous things that have been throughout this season of the Gates of Oblivion is put back in the Impresario, it looks like, according to this list. So that's very cool. If you missed any of the fragments for anything you're trying to build, now's your opportunity to get those as well. It's a really good event. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to kick off the end of the year. It's where's the end date? It goes for a while. Shoot, I accidentally clicked off the link. Well, whatever. It goes for quite a while. Opinions on New Life? Are you a big fan of New Life?
It ends on January 4th at 10 a.m. Eastern.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So are you a New Life fan? Wow, that's actually an exceedingly long time. Holy crap. That is a lot of tickets / double XP time.
I'm a huge fan of the New Life Festival. It allows many people who may have missed events earlier in the year to be able to get those rewards that were available earlier in the year that they missed out on. And I think it's a great time overall, because a lot of times in the community, you actually see people going out, gifting things to other members of the community, doing raffles or doing things that are going to benefit the community itself and be able to get everyone involved. And it's great to see when people get together and actually start to actually help out other members of the community.
Yeah, I like this event. I do the quests usually like a couple times, but since I've done this event every year since it's been created, I only like doing them a couple times, and then after that I just do like usually my one for the tickets for each day. But it's one of those things where I don't know, I just like the the vibe to this event personally. I think it's just like, it's a good holiday event with like just kind of like your generic holiday event, but they do a good job with there being so many different races in Elder Scrolls. I do a good job of encompassing all of them. And the thing that I liked that they added last year was the Imperial version, where you could actually get the memory, like you would have like that weird memory thing from doing the Imperial Writ one. I liked that addition quite a bit, as they've been kind of fleshing out the events if you've been here since the beginning. So it's not exactly the same event. There's a little something extra that you can get. And I thought that one was a nice touch, because I'm curious if they're going to add this current season to the possible memories you might get.
I was thinking exactly the same thing, because I look forward to, whenever that first came out, I looked forward to seeing exactly what characters from the past I might actually be meeting. I don't want to go into spoilers into it, but it's interesting to be able to think that our characters are remembering these older characters that they may have encountered.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool that Elder Scrolls Online has like a weird... you can't... They make references to when you do quests later on, but then like when you do things in weird order, sometimes it's hard because people will seem like they don't remember you or whatever. For the most part, ESO does a pretty impressive job of making reference to, I guess, essentially reading what you've accomplished in game, and people make references to remembering you or whatever the case. And the fact that this has like a system designed around like, oh yeah, you get memories based on like quest lines you've completed with characters that may have fallen and stuff like that, I think is really, really cool, just because some of them, it's just there. It was funny. I forget. And again, I'm not going to spoil quests even outside this year specifically, but I remember there was one where I was like, I don't even remember who that was. And I ended up looking them up, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot about that quest entirely. So it was also kind of neat because it reminded me of another quest like way back that I just had no recollection of at the time.
I do want to say that it is kind of ironic, because our character is supposed to be remembering these people as they're completing this quest. And the protagonist of ESO he can be really forgetful at times.
That's actually a pretty good point. But yeah, so definitely look out for that. That's starting next week. It'll be in full swing by the time we have our next episode. And with that, I kind of want to delve into what what you're joining me on this episode for. And in order to kick things off with the evolution of the series, collecting all the stuff that we love to collect and, that's outside the games and all of these things like that, kind of just viewing the series as the best way to put it is an intellectual property or an IP entirely, because it's expanded way beyond just being video games. And you're part of the Imperial Library, which basically is a literal library that keeps track of most of this stuff. Actually, to be fair, I would say, as opposed to the USB, which is a great wiki that we constantly reference, we've had them on the show and stuff like that, I use myself. The Imperial Library is a little more literally everything. Like, if it exists down to like forum transcripts, you can find it on the Imperial Library. So why don't you like kind of give a little background on your experience with the series, what people might know you as, where people can find you, if they're interested in that, and kind of give like a little background as what you do with the Imperial Library to start.
So, as you may be aware, I'm the newest librarian for the Imperial Library. I actually started with the Elder Scrolls series back with Arena, with watching my uncle play the game. I didn't actually get into the series really deep until around the end of Morrowind, to when it was converting to Oblivion, is when I really started to delve into it. And it has taken me a long time, but I've gone back and played every single game to completion. And then I joined the Imperial Library after, first of all, I started in the community with Entropy Rising, which was a guild, one of the first major guilds of ESO. We did a lot of interviews and things with Zoss at that time. There was actually a New Life interview that we did about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
For that. And from there, I continued to try to find new ways to help the community, and I found my home with the Imperial Library. The Imperial Library is a reference website that you can go to find any source documents on Elder Scrolls. We have all the books located there. We have interviews that deal with the lore. We have any kind of out-of-game text that the developers have created throughout the years. And we also have recently added this year reference documents that pull all of the text from the games and present them in a raw format for you to be able to peruse. As our goal is not to tell you what the lore is or how to interpret it, we just provide the sources, just like a regular library would do. We're there to show you, hey, this is all the sources that are available to you. Use them and interpret the lore. And we have forums that you're able to provide us with your discoveries, or if you put things together and say, hey, what about this? Or if you need help with finding certain types of lore, we're there to help you. We also have a Discord that much research has occurred on with any kind of translations of text and things, such as when you're getting into the lore, you'll find that there's different texts and translations. We have translation dictionaries for the Dova language, which we recently added just last month. We got from Bethesda a source document that we have updated our list to include. We just said all around tried to give you everything Elder Scrolls related.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, and I feel like oftentimes it's not mentioned as frequently as the USP, and it's kind of curious why, because like the USP is a literal Wikipedia and it provides a lot of quest details, which that I understand, but it's like if you it's why actually on Elder Scrolls Lorecast, why even though we use the USB for stuff, we constantly cross-check everything with the Imperial Library to make sure that we have as much as we can cram into an hour, because we have to kind of keep it somewhat more condensed than we do here at Tales. But a lot of the stuff we get, especially when we're looking at some of the more bizarre topics and stuff like that, the real information you can kind of really dig into, because you can just get the actual reference itself is with the Imperial Library. So it's a fantastic resource, more so beyond just the scope of the games, personally. Like, I think that's where you guys kind of all shine over there.
Oh, definitely. And outside of the game, we also have a few other sections, like any kind of lore that appears on websites, even ones that are no longer live. We have backed up all of those on the library as well. So any kind of out-of-game text you're going to be able to find on the library in its original format, presented in a text format.
Yeah, which is, again, super useful. We actually had to use it quite a bit when we were getting into, when we did our Pelennel episode and when we were doing our Coda episode, a lot of that needed to actually be referenced from the forums, because the fact that my stream just freaked out. All right, ignore that. What do you call it? The fact that we decided to dive into kind of the more robotic, so to speak, version of Pelennel, that's really not, like, there's little references in game, but the main thing is kind of Michael Kirkbride's writings and discussing it on the forums, which again, we had to go to the group of you in order to get, because that's not really officially documented, but you can't make your case for, well, hey, there's a potential here without having the writer of Pelennel as a source material. So it's very neat, especially when you want to go into deep dives.
I do want to mention something that's going to be an announcement to everyone, actually, and you're going to have an exclusive for this. We are actually going to be updating our dev comment section of the library this Christmas as a Christmas gift to everyone. We have over 80 new in-character posts from developers from the forums going all the way back to the late 1990s to be able to present to the community so that you can be able to enjoy these old posts that give new insights.
I really kind of can't recommend using it enough, because it's a great, as you put it, it is a literal library the way it is treated, which is super useful when you're just doing like actual research for something. So big fan of what you do there. Now that also leads me into the fact that you have extensive experience with this series. And you work, obviously with documenting a lot of it, but more than just that, like you said, you've played through to completion all of the games. I have not completed all of the games. I've completed a decent amount of them, but haven't completed all of them. I'm kind of interested in your take, to start things off, on how the series has kind of evolved game-wise, because a lot of times things are referenced that it's like, oh, they dumbed this down, they did this isn't in the game anymore, and I don't necessarily always feel that that's the case. Sometimes things are changed strategically because, well, just because something is simpler doesn't mean that it's dumbed down. It might just be fixing kind of a problematic way of originally doing something.
So in my research of the series, I have gone through forum posts that go back all the way to when Arena was first released. And you will actually find that with each new iteration, starting with Daggerfall, that the fan base is always going to complain that the new game is a dumbed down version of the previous game. And then you're going to have the same exact thing occur with every new iteration that comes out. I expect that we're going to see the exact same thing with The Elder Scrolls 6 when it comes out, to where people are going to be like, The Elder Scrolls 5 was so much better. It did this right. It did that right. This game is dumbed down. The lore is not as good. You're going to see that every single time with a new release, I believe. Another interesting thing about the series as a whole is that I like to view the series as split up into different eras that they have. You have your first era, which is like Arena, Daggerfall, and Battlespire, which have a similar tone. And then you have the alien tone that you start to get with Redguard, Morrowind, and Shadowkey in the mobile games. Mm-hmm. And then you have a more less alien, but view was starting with Oblivion, going forward into Skyrim. And then finally, you have your last era, which would be starting with ESO, and just the sheer volume. I think ESO by itself can be pretty much considered its own major contribution to the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely kind of feel that. And the thing that I like about the series itself is that it has all of those avenues that you were kind of referencing. And ESO recently, because it's just so massive, has kind of been covering such a huge swath of the series, where each of the ones, kind of like you had mentioned, has its own little like thing, Daggerfall being comically massive as well, obviously, but like it had its own vibe, it had its own feel. And some of the more esoteric games as well, Battlespire being the one that I always reference the most. It was like the feel of Battlespire is super weird, and honestly and there are references to it, which I personally love, with this year of Oblivion, with the Gates of Oblivion, and specifically with the Deadlands. There's definite reminiscent feels of some of the stuff from Battlespire, which is, one, a credit to how diligent they are at making sure that they keep the series true to itself, but it's so different from the feel of, for example, Skyrim or Oblivion or something like that. So yeah, it's just, there's so many different avenues. It makes the world feel full. It's not just this, for example, our own planet. There's all of these things that we deal with are because there's so many different cultures, there's so many different things in general. We're all on the same planet. Most fantasy worlds don't go that deep into it. It's just like, yeah, this is an ice world. It's all ice. It's like, the world of Nirn and stuff like that, it feels like a full encompassed universe, which is why I always find it so fascinating, because no matter what even you're in the mood to play outside of having like a first person shooter, I guess, the series kind of covers it in one way or another.
I agree completely. The Elder Scrolls, I don't view it as just one type of game. The tone, each game has its own tone to it, and they all meld together to create this universe that you're able to find dark parts of it, such as Battlespire, but you also have your light and humorous side, such as Meg the Liar. But with everything with Elder Scrolls, it's a living, breathing world that's constantly evolving with each iteration that comes out. And I feel like because it feels like a living world, you're able to branch out into different types of games or different types of tones that you can be able to experience this world through. That's something that I feel like many franchises are missing. If you look at another franchise like Assassin's Creed, it's just about an assassin. Or if you look at the Elder Scrolls, though, each game is its own individual thing. But when it comes to the world, you find pretty much anything. You can find any kind of story. You can find light-hearted humor, or even the deepest, the darkest kind of stories as well.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, you know, I even had to have one episode where I didn't want it to come across, but like Battlespire as a concept, like all of the games have dark bits. I definitely, you know, the series is definitely become an M-rated series for a reason, because a lot of it is generally pretty palatable, and even in some of the mainstream games like Skyrim and Oblivion and stuff like that, they definitely aren't at surface value just like offensive. It's not like that necessarily, but this is not a super pleasant world to live in that we've joked about before, and some of the stuff in the series gets really, for lack of a better, it's really screwed up. And like the Battlespire was one where a lot of the Oblivion-based things and dealing with the Daedra, because they don't have the same sense of morality in the series that we do, some of that stuff gets really twisted, and it's like, yeah, it is really a lot darker at points than I think a lot of people like. And that's fine. I totally get that. And if that's parts of the stuff that you don't really want to engage that much with, I understand it. Like, it makes sense, because if you're going to make something believable and have conflict like this, you don't always just have a concept of evil necessarily, which a lot of fantasy or writing will. It's just like, here is your antagonist. The antagonists oftentimes have this like weird gray area, which can make things a little dicey. And then when something horrible happens, or these cultures treat each other like absolute garbage in certain situations, because there's a reason the series, they definitely didn't leave their roots of the original Elder Scrolls 1 arena being called the arena. Now, granted, the original design of the arena being like this just arena fighter was changed, but the world was originally referred to as being so hostile, it got the nickname the arena. Even though that original design was shifted away from as the series progressed, they didn't totally dump the idea of, yeah, this world is just brutal and savage, as well as like, oh yeah, here are things to make the series more appealing to people. Also, a great way of not making the people who play your game depressed all the time because everything's the worst thing that's ever existed. Like, it's good to have the mix, even when things give you a reaction that a lot of people might not like. That, I mean, vampires, which are super popular, their creation is horrible, like just horrible. But that's what makes it so real, because it's so awful. It doesn't mean you like that thing. It means that it gives you a feeling of reaction to it. And sometimes that feeling of reaction is repulsion. It doesn't need to always be good. It's like, but if that's too much, I understand why people prefer the more lighthearted things, which ESO mostly addresses. Like, I feel like it's a little less, like, ESO definitely gets dark, but I feel like it's more on the side quest stuff than overtly in your face. Whereas, Battlespire was kind of all over the place, especially when you're dealing with, some of the Daedra during that story.
I definitely feel like Battlespire is not a game that would be created in today's world, as it's a little bit too dark in some ways.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And, some of them, I mean, I have a dark sense of humor, so take that for what you will. But, like, I did find some of it, like, so dark it was funny, because I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe they're getting into this. Like, good Lord, that is screwed up. And it definitely, since the series has been around for so long, you definitely get a feel for the era that some of these games came out in. And the running joke when you're talking about, like, equality and stuff like that, I've always liked that the series seems to just kind of have people be people, which is something I think is really, really cool, because they are. Even in the series, it's like, that there's arguments against it, but that's usually, like, it's not really praised in that way. But the thing that I like about the fact that the series has evolved so much in so many different ways to explain beliefs in the series, and the horrible things like slavery in the series, which you have to kind of deal with from the different aspects, depending upon who you happen to be working with or for at the time. But when you get back into some of the older stuff and you just have, like, the cosmeticness, so to speak, man, the games that came out in the 90s are super 90s. Like, just like the box art for Arena alone is so funny when you just look back at that time period. It's like, yep, this definitely came out in the 90s. Whereas the series kind of hasn't leaned as much into that anymore, which, I think that's probably for the better in many cases.
Definitely for the better. I feel like now we're able to focus on the good side of things instead of instead of the horrible parts showing their face. Those horrible parts are still there within the lore. If you look deep enough, you're going to find it. Let me take an example, actually, of Sheogorath. Everyone thinks of Sheogorath as this fun character that, oh, cheese, and then he laughs or something like that. But if you start looking into his lore, you're going to find that there are some dark things that he's done, because he represents madness, not just in the lighthearted way, but in the dark side as well. For instance, there was a role play that was done on the forums by the creator of Sheogorath, who his name is based on, which is which would be Theodore Peterson. And he played Sheogorath to where he ended up taking kids away during Tales and Talos. At the festival of Tales and Talos, he actually kidnapped a bunch of kids, and it didn't give them back. And so a lot of parents, and what happened is every Tales and Talos after that, he would send back the voices of the children to their parents to drive them mad. And things like that, where if you look deep enough, you're going to find things that are not the happy stories that people focus on.
Yeah, and Sheogorath is a great example of that, actually, because he's very memeable. It's you had mentioned the cheese thing and the, like, oh, ha ha ha. It's not to mention that Wes Johnson does a phenomenal job giving that character life, but at the same time, it is interesting because that happy-go-lucky, like, oh, look, I'm a skooma cat type of veneer is only one side of mania and dementia, which is in his realm of the Shivering Isles. And I like the fact that there's a lot with Sheogorath. He's a great one where the surface value seems super approachable as a character, and oh, this is funny, the bad guys are wacky in this series. And then when you delve into things like what you had just mentioned, the 16 Accords of Madness is another one where that series shows some of the smarter, more manipulative methods that Sheogorath uses, which are also generally not as dwelled as heavily upon in the games. And personally, because I know you've played it as well, his involvement with the storyline to anybody who has played the Elder Scrolls Legends, the card game, that's another one that gives you a very good feel for this is not lighthearted and happy, because he will go from lighthearted and happy in one dialogue sequence to malicious and very, very disturbing in like borderline like one sentence to another. And it gives a bit more feel to that dichotomy where it's like, wow, this character is actually super, super off the rails, and not in just like a cheesy, like, well, pun intended, I guess, cheesy way where it's like, oh, look how goofy and fun I am. It's like, nope, this character is really, really out for themselves and has some seriously deep issues that also parody themselves at certain points and make it seem funny or fun.
Exactly. And what I love about the series is that there are layers to the series. You have your top layer, which is like the memeable content. Then you have your gameplay that you play, that everyone plays, the main story. And you can keep going deeper and deeper and peeling back these layers to find more and more of this world and how it's all interconnected and how there's a lot more to everything that you see than you at first will realize. To give an example of this, everyone views Daedra as humanoid, and they try to relate to them on a personal level as they look humanoid, they look human, so you view them as human. But when you get into their ideology and what exactly gets them ticking, you realize that they are not human. They don't have the same moral values. They don't have the same ideology, as death doesn't mean anything to them. They just respond, or that they don't view eating in the same way that a human would. And so everything that they view the world as is going to be completely different. And that's something to where you have layers that you can pull back, and it just creates a great environment that you can continue to look into, and you can go on for years. I know I've gone on for years just looking into different stuff.
Yeah, and to that point, without, just lingering so much on some of these things, one of the things that you made reference to the fact, and a lot of the current chapter when you're dealing with Daedra and stuff like that, one of the things that's long known is like Daedra can't really die. They reform, so to speak, eventually. And one of the things that originally was pretty brutal, which I didn't really know about until Battlespire, and it's funny because it seems like recently there's actually there's actually a decent amount in the current Deadlands chapter or DLC, because Deadlands is the DLC, kind of referencing back to, like I had said, a lot of stuff in Battlespire, one of which being that when they're reformed, it's not just this, oh yeah, I'm immortal, I die, I come back, I'm fine. There's like problematic repercussions that come about having to forcibly be reconstructed. And it, over time, kind of wears on their psyche, which is in and of itself a dark concept, knowing that with each reincarnation, it almost takes a part of them as well. So it's like, wow, that's a dark existence to think about, where it's like, so you never technically die, but each time part of your sanity might die. Like, ouch, that is existential crisis galore right there. Like that is brutal, but it's done in a way that, unless you look deeper in, they don't slap you in the face with that stuff all the time to kind of just bring everything down. It's these extra layers, like you said, of the lore where these things are fleshed out, and more, the more you dig in is oftentimes where you find these dark bits where it's like, oh, that's more than it seems, and that's much less enjoyable than it sounds. All right, so the next thing I kind of wanted to get into, just because I feel a good way to like close up kind of like the evolution topic of this, is throughout the series, it's jumped around even a lot gameplay wise. They're not, most people obviously know either Skyrim, I would say, is the most well-known, followed at this point probably by ESO, just simple numbers wise. And the series is, well, even in those two games, one is an MMO, one is a single-player open-world game, heavily supported by mods from the community and the devs themselves. And then going back through the series, we had mentioned, oh, well, certain things change here or there. Things have changed to the point of some of the games are open world adventures where you create your own character and play through as an adventure. The original two, I would say, both Elder Scrolls 1, well, I would say Elder Scrolls 1 Arena is probably the most, here is your fantasy world, do what you want. And then Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, from what I've played of it, plus from what I've seen of it, definitely fleshed out the world itself and kind of let you take what was in one, gave it a more concrete and unique setting, as opposed to kind of more of just an open generic fantasy world. And both of those games were kind of an open role-playing experience, so to speak. Like, honestly, Daggerfall, especially for its time, was, in the terms of an MMO where it's like you can play how you want, you can literally kind of play Daggerfall however you want. Like, oh, I just want to be a merchant. That's just what I do in my world. And I'm going to buy houses and I'm going to take out a mortgage. And it's like, these are all things you can literally do in game, which is like honestly pretty flabbergasting, especially from when the game came out and how immense it is.
I will say that Daggerfall was really ambitious for its time. Going back to Arena first, Arena introduced a world, and it allowed you to get familiar with the world itself. And then Daggerfall built upon what Arena laid out, and it fleshed out the characters in the world. It created political situations that you would deal with. And Daggerfall was very ambitious for its time, and a lot of features didn't actually get added to the game that were in development. There's housing, but there's actually supposed to be ability to decorate your houses. You were supposed to be able to do so much more than what eventually was released. The developers hard-coded the game from scratch, which was Julian Lefay. Mm-hmm. And they added a bunch of features, but their deadline started to come up, so they had to drop a lot of them in order to get the game to ship on time, which I think is a continuing thing that people complain about throughout the series, is that they feel like they weren't able to add everything that they wanted to. But then once you go into the next couple of games from Daggerfall, it builds upon the world. Battlespire built upon the demonic side of it with the Daedra. And it was more like a Doom-like game. Instead of having your character be open world, doing what you want to do, instead you're thrown into a situation to where you're behind enemy lines and you're trying to do everything you can to stay alive and be able to survive in an unfamiliar environment. Then you get Redguard, which came next. Redguard really changed the series to where it introduced a ton of the background lore that we still use today, which was the first pocket guide to the Empire, which came packaged within the manual for the game. I feel like at Redguard, we could talk all day about the pocket guide and how it introduced the unreliable narrator really in depth into the series, to where you have this one text saying one thing, then you have in the margins a elf writing their own notes saying, hey, this is incorrect. And it makes you wonder how much of this is real, how much of this is not. But it creates a really interesting world that feels lived in.
Yeah, and it's funny because like that's exactly it. Like even just there, the series has already taken very different directions because the way that Battlespire condensed things down gave a narrative, but it was from a literal like dungeon crawler perspective. Like you said, it was like the levels are literal level bases of the Battlespire. So it, just like another first person shooter of the day, like Doom or Quake or something like that, you had to complete levels. It wasn't about just roaming around. There were no merchants in Battlespire, which actually made it the reason why I was like, oh no, if I don't know what I'm getting as gear because I played through it totally clueless, I was like, well, I wonder if fist fighting's even a possible option, because what if I have no fist fighting skill, which isn't even a thing in the current game of ESO. There is no fist fighting skill. So I was like, oh, well, that's kind of neat that I can kind of have like a monk style. But I was like, at least that way with weapon degradation, hey, at least my weapon can't break unless it's just my hands break, which I think is a bigger problem. So I went with like that approach because, you know, there are no merchants to even like barter with or anything like that. And then
I will say you're insane for playing through Battlespire with an unarmed build.
It definitely had mixed results. It was certainly fun, and I actually, you know, did think I screwed myself over a couple times. And even though some of the older games, I mean, all of Bethesda games, the joke is how many bugs and stuff you get, or are they a bug or are they a feature? Battlespire is definitely notoriously unstable. And one of the things amongst the God knows how many times I broke the game while playing it, one thing that I really honestly appreciated, especially when it came down to it, was the fact that when you needed a quest item, even if you didn't have the ability to, like, the proficiency to use it, the game made an exception for you. And I was like, oh, thank you. It's like, because when you have to wield the Spear of Bitter Mercy, I was like, I don't know how to use a spear. I literally have taken this out of my ability to use. So I was like, does my game end here? Like, ugh. And luckily that was not the case. But then, like you had mentioned, Redguard, and Redguard is not open world, but it's not a level-based game either. It's kind of like a hub-based thing, very reminiscent, honestly, to the thing I always referenced it. It really feels like a kind of a, I mean, it's old, so they're all kind of unpolished, but a slightly less polished version of what you would get from the original Tomb Raider games. It's like an action-adventure game, honestly.
The interesting thing about Redguard is that at one point, they were planning to port it to a game console, PlayStation. There's actually two early ports of The Elder Scrolls that was going to be ported to the PlayStation. Arena and Redguard were both going to be ported, but it was outsourced to another company that didn't follow through with it, and so we didn't get those versions. But Redguard is basically a Tomb Raider version in a adventure game within the Elder Scrolls universe. And it has one of the best stories of any of the Elder Scrolls games, as the voice acting at times was bad, but mostly it was good. Cyrus is a character that you really learn to love, as he has that adventurous spirit that many players want to play as. And it really introduced much of the world itself that had been lacking up until that point.
Yeah, and it's interesting to bring that up because Cyrus, again, it's interesting because you don't make that character. This is his story, and you play through it in that game. So it's not even an RPG from the aspect of creating a character with a scripted story. They literally give you your character. And again, totally to echo your point, his voice actor is awesome. There are several voice actors who are really, really cool. One of my favorite things, he's kind of obnoxious, but it's the first time you actually see a Slode in the series with Nagasta, the Necromancer, really like that. And then you have other characters, like Rasmo or whatever, and oh my god, their voice actors are comically bad. Like, so it's even more apparent like how diverse the cast was for it, because some of them are hysterically bad. Others are like, wow, this voice actor is awesome.
Speaking of bad voice acting, there's actually there is a Easter egg within it to where there's this character named Mariah, and she has the worst voice that you hear from any character ever. And you can actually take a torch and be able to basically set her on fire so that she no longer exists in the game because her voice was that horrible. But going on with Redguard, though, I feel like it was really the turning point in the series that started to build upon the world, and it created a lot that the rest of the series was able to build upon. And many of that was thanks to the inclusion of new people coming onto the team, such as Michael Kirkbride and other developers as well.
Yeah, and it kind of, the older games, specifically Arena and very, very much Daggerfall, the difference with those two games, which kind of they steered away from going, forward, because I know even for the time, Daggerfall was notoriously buggy, because so much of the game, because it was so unbelievably massive, and it's still up there as like one of like the biggest games that's ever been created, and it created in literal square miles, like just the amount of the size. But a lot of that, as a result, you can't individually place all of that. So a lot of it's procedurally generated, which it's a different beast there. And sometimes, how AI will line things up in procedural generation doesn't always make the most sense, which you end up with some problems with. And then when they started to curate the series a little more, the world had to shrink, but at the same time, things always had a little more to them. Like, it felt a little more real. It felt a little less like, oh yes, a computer program made this. Like Morrowind specifically, that when you open that tree stump, that was placed, like what was in there was placed in there. When you were diving out into the water in the Sea of Ghosts and you found a log next to a broken ship, and it had like a glass helmet of, I don't know, water breathing, for example, that was crafted and placed there. And somebody had a story that was like, oh, this is here because this happened. And it started to really make the series kind of get its realistic feeling and the sense of like adventure, to the point of you can go anywhere and there's a good chance you'll find something of interest. Like, it really fulfilled the adventure idea through and through.
Morrowind, I agree completely with you in regards to it, to where the environmental storytelling that began with Morrowind really started to make the world feel lived in. You can be able to find a dead body with a note beside it that had his last words in it. And these environmental storytelling has continued throughout all the series. Even ESO makes use of it. There will be things that you will come across that don't have any quest involved with it, but it makes you stop, and then you look at it and you think to yourself, wow, this exists here, and makes you actually feel that this world exists. A great example of this in ESO will actually be in the Alakir Desert. You can come across this dog that is sitting there and it looks sad, and it's in front of his tombstone. There's no quest involved with it, but just looking at this, you come across it and you're like, there's a story here. And even though it's not being told to me, I can see it and I can experience it, and I can feel what that dog is feeling. And it makes you feel this world exists.
Mm-hmm. I actually know exactly what you're talking about. Back on my original PlayStation, when I found that, I took a picture of it because I was curious when I was like chilling next to the dog. I took a picture because I was like, I wonder if this ever relates to anything. And it doesn't. Like you said, it's a story that happened. You missed that one. You weren't there for it. Like, the world does stuff without you actually engaging with it as well. And I just remember being so sad because I was like, oh man, that's depressing. Like, the dog's just like hanging out with what I assume would be, maybe his human or mer, who knows, but that story you weren't part of, but it went on without you, ideally, is how it feels, which is, again, one thing that the series does so well is just like make you feel like, yeah, you're a part of it, but if you're not here, other stuff's happening anyways. Like it's not all about your character all the time. So then I guess we'd be remiss to talk about the last couple before we kind of move on to the last part of the topic, which would be, we've mentioned the more recent ones where things have been simplified a bit, but I really wanted to get into some of their other offshoots that they had with the Travels games, which was like a little side series. There's been the Elder Scrolls Blades, which is a kind of the newer Travels games without the label, the Elder Scrolls Travels. You also have Elder Scrolls Legends, which was the mobile card game and digital card game I've showed it off on the show before. They actually printed some real cards for events, which the artwork is gorgeous on those things. So I love, the art. I always think the design to the series is really good. But yeah, the art to them is really cool. And in terms of different directions the series has taken, Shadowkey specifically was, here's kind of a mix. Well, it was kind of an open world, but it needed to be done in hubs for technical limitations. But it basically was attempting to be a full Elder Scrolls game, except on an N-Gage, not even a cell phone, specifically an N-Gage, which was quite an experience ambitious as hell, because it also had multiplayer, which is bizarre.
It is definitely the odd one out of the travel series, to where this was a time when phone games that you would play would be Snake on your phone. That would be the best game that you could probably get. You have a flip phone, and this game was a fully 3D realized game in the Elder Scrolls series that actually was open world as much as it could be. And it was amazing what they could do with the limited amount of technology that they had at the time.
Yeah, and it's honestly, as much as when I played through it originally and told my tales going through it, and now that you've actually shown me how I am able to actually link it up and hopefully stream it soon, it's definitely rough for sure. Some of the roughness is due to the technical limitations of the N-Gage as well, but honestly, for what the game itself is, it's shocking what they did with it. Like, it might not run well, but it's pretty impressive, especially considering the time that it dropped in, and it's got a Bluetooth co-op potential, which is just completely unheard of at that point. And it's got some references, and although it's generally joked about that it's not really remembered, most people don't even know what the hell Shadowkey is. There's the concept of shadow magic, and I've made reference to the fact that there's a pickpocketable item in Elder Scrolls Online that's the Star Tooth, which is your main quest collectible. These things still exist in the series. Like, it's not totally forgotten. It's there.
There's a lot more references that many people probably gloss over. Like in Skyrim, Azura Nightwilder is mentioned with Stas from Neloth. Mm-hmm. And the latest chapter, Blackwood, actually featured a quest where you get Azura's one of the books of Azura Nightwilder. And it's amazing that even though this game was so long ago and was on a platform that probably nobody has really played, it's still remembered to this day, even if it's only small references here and there. And I think that goes to show that this game was it was exceptional for its time. Unlike Dawnstar and Stormhold, which are both very simple games, but you won't be finding any references to them in any future Elder Scrolls, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'll be pretty surprised. I went through Dawnstar as much as I want to get the different ending, because I had numerous issues when I was going through it, but it's kind of hard to explain. So I had zero idea what these games even were when I first kicked them up. And Dawnstar is basically a whodunit, who's the traitor mystery game, which is super strange because you're still in first person. These were Java phone games as well. So like this is, think flip phone quality. I don't actually have a great reference point for them. There's so little on them. That's why I want to stream both of these again, just as like a full playthrough. But like they're really awkward, and the frame rate is rough, and it's very difficult to play. And yeah, they're just, it seems like they're meant to be played super quick and then be done with it for the most part. Whereas with Shadowkey, at least, that was a full game for the most part. That takes, I don't remember my exact time, but it probably took me somewhere in the range of like 15, 20 hours to actually beat Shadowkey. These games, I mean, to be fair, since I didn't know what I was doing, I took a blind guess as to who the traitor was in Dawnstar and happened to just get it right, but I was so underleveled because I didn't do anything. I got mauled by bandits and died in 4 seconds, and I was like, what? I don't even know what just happened.
There's actually a funny thing about Dawnstar. The traitor is not set. It changes every time you start a new game.
Yeah.
Which is surprising for the game when it came out. But they're both very forgettable games. They're the most forgettable games in the series, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're right. And to be fair, because they're so limited, there's really not all that much to advertise, like, or add to the series. Whereas Shadowkey had a story. It was relatively primitive, but it had some cool lore that came around it, and you got to see these different provinces. Granted, they were incredibly polygonal for the time, but like you got to experience these things. One of the things that I personally loved was when I got to go to Dragonstar, and I'm used to Dragonstar and the Dragonstar Arena from ESO, so playing those out of order, I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. Whereas Dawnstar and Stormhold, it honestly feels like a very short side quest that you would get in Elder Scrolls Online condensed into like a phone game is how the experience really seemed. It's not this sprawling anything. It's just, here's a little thing that happened during this time. It really wasn't that important, and you're not a super meaningful hero.
You could, if you really wanted to try to put a reference in there, they could reference two different things from these games. Stormhold could easily, the crystals that you collect could easily be tied to the Ayleids, as the Borsaic Ayleids actually were at the site of Stormhold. You can actually find ruins of the Ayleid civilization that Stormhold is built on top of. As for Dawnstar, the ice tribes that you encounter could easily be attributed to the Kamala invasions that happened. So there are little hints that you could expand upon if they really wanted to, but so very few people play these games that we might have 50% of them right here to where it's not going to reference to very many people.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's just it. It's like when we're talking small numbers, I mean, that's honestly not that big of an exaggeration. The numbers to these games are like infinitesimally small compared to other situations. So they're more of just like an annex added to the series rather than something that will probably really have much to do with the overall series anymore.
I do want to make a small mention about the last Elder Scrolls Travels. 1 second.
Yeah, I was going to say we're dealing with trains and me losing my voice briefly for 1 second. So, no, take your time. I love the train, like just needing to be like, oh, damn it.
Okay, so what I was saying is that one thing that I want to mention when we're talking about Elder Scrolls Travels that is often forgotten as well is the Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion, the phone game. And this game is so hilarious for the dialogue that it gives the main character. The champion of Kavach actually is a really horrible person within this game. And if you want to read the dialogue from the game, I recommend looking on the Imperial Library. We have the full dialogue of the game up on the site. And this character, you rescue the Martin Septim, and the first thing that your character does is, "Where's my gold?" And he's very blunt and just in your face about, if you're not going to pay me, then I'm not going to be around.
Fantastic. I love that. Well, that's something that the series also kind of has had a big thing with, is that honestly, for being a hero, quote unquote, you're not always the most standard hero. There's a lot of achievement-based quests in ESO that kind of show that you have questionable moral ethics at points, like robbing random merchants and stuff like that. The Dark Brotherhood in general is a highly questionable organization, along with the Thieves Guild to a lesser extent, as you're not murdering everybody, but stealing from them is probably not exactly a big selling point either. And then, like, that's just it. These series do give you some moral ambiguity, and it's funny because occasionally you just are straight up questionable. It's like, wow, this is our hero? Yikes. Like, that's a choice for being a hero, I suppose.
This actually goes back to the origins of the series as a whole, to where it spawned out of wanting to create a video game that featured play what you want. It was inspired by D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, to where the developers wanted to create this world that you can be what you want to be. You're not put into the hero role to where you're this almighty hero, and you get to choose if you're going to be a dark hero, if you're going to be the holy paladin. Whatever you want to be is who you get to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that kind of just being our delve into some of the interesting twists the series has taken, one of the other things that I obviously had mentioned that I was super interested in is some of your thoughts. We had kind of touched on it from an ESO perspective of the promotional material that they do and stuff like that, but just from the like collection standpoint of the series as a whole, do you have any things that you're specifically a big fan of that they've created over the years, / what are some other avenues that you might like to see the series kind of delve into that they might not have already?
So in relation to merchandise, I really love the miniatures that Modiphius is putting out. They're very high quality, and they're something that I've been wanting for years. What you may not realize is that there have been Elder Scrolls miniatures before. There was one for Daggerfall, which was the Underking. There was one for the Redguard, where you have an actual Cyrus figurine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And with these figurines, I feel like it's a great way to be able to have a piece of the world that you can put on your shelf and say, look at this. And Elder Scrolls Online was doing this a lot with its statues that it had every year. With their collector's editions. And I'm really sad that they went away with the collector's editions because I look forward to those.
I definitely do too. I had a big joke the year that Elsewhere came out and we didn't get a collector's edition. I was not too keen with that, so I just put like cat ears on my Alduin statue and said that was it for the year. But I've liked that they've kind of listened to people saying like, okay, would really like those. However you want to view it, it's kind of contentious, so we're not really going to get into the monetization way that they do it. Unfortunately, video games in general are a pretty expensive hobby, so some of the collectibles then exacerbate that to a new level. But pricing aside, I did like that they started to reintroduce it where you could get the game, and if you wanted the extra bundle, they came up with a way that it's like, okay, we're giving you an update code. You're not buying the same game every year, because that was kind of getting unnecessary. But at the same time, the people who were buying the collector's editions, me and you, for example, are obviously already invested in the game, so what the hell do we need a brand new copy of like the full game for? Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it. You're marketing to a demographic that's already invested, so why do you need to give them the base thing? So I like the fact that they've kind of separated it, but I do like the collector's edition thing. But they brought it back last year with Greymoor. We had the vampire statue. We both got our respective shelves. This year we had the Dagon bundle, which was also very cool. And it was painted compared to the other years where they're kind of either a bronzish finish, a platinum-ish finish, or like this grayish like stone. Mehrunes Dagon was straight up like painted. They also had one for a Calgrantid statue that was hand painted as well. They're relatively limited in quantity, but they do look really, really nice, even if they are rather expensive.
I agree completely. I do like that they are throwing a bone to those collectors such as me and you. I just felt that there was something missing about there not being the physical collector's edition, because it's something that I was looking forward to. But I do enjoy the statues that they have been putting out. They're not nearly as expensive as the Gaming Heads ones that I avoided because it was way too high of a price. Other things that I would love to be able to see more of is books. Both comic books. I would love a comic book written in the Elder Scrolls series that follows maybe the adventures of Cyrus, like the one that was featured in the guide to the Elder Scrolls Redguard, or even one based in the Elder Scrolls online portion of the universe, to where if you have an ongoing comic, that would be something that I would love, or a novel series that creates side stories. We only have 2 novels out there, and it's something that I feel like is an untapped market for the series as a whole.
Yeah, I definitely want to follow that up with the novel thing. I think has a lot of untapped potential, because a lot of people obviously like to read. You can definitely explore some very different avenues via that. And I actually enjoyed both of the novels, the Infernal City and Lord of Souls. I thought they were both good, but they were definitely a little strange, writing style wise, so to speak. It was much farther back in the series. The audio versions are also very good if you don't like reading. Like me personally, I tend to not just want to sit and read. So I got the audio books on my phone and actually listened to them like I would a podcast at work. And I really enjoyed listening to them that way. I actually wish I knew who it was off the top of my head, so I apologize. But the narrator is very, very good. Some of the pronunciations of things are a little weird because, again, they're not real words, so to speak. So sometimes naming gets a little strange, because you could kind of tell that they weren't necessarily an Elder Scrolls fan writing this. They were a writer who was contracted to do this, which they did a good job with, and they've definitely made references to the books within the series, like canon series of the games. But I feel like since the series is so much more well-known now than when the books were written, that you could find somebody that's already an established novelist who also has a vested interest in the series, and you might have a more solid connection and feel if you were to try doing some other novels.
I agree completely with that as well, to where the novels, if we have new novels, it's going to take somebody that really knows the series in and out, or is collaborating with the writers of the series to be able to get the feel and the tone down correct. And there's so many details that it would take researching years to be able to get a good grasp of everything that the Elder Scrolls has to offer and to be able to present that in a novel format. So it's really hard for someone that's not familiar with the series to come in and write about the series.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. I mean, you can essentially, and there are other people, the Selectives Lorecast, Aramethius, the Fudge Muppet, Camelworks. They borderline at points go into like thesis format, like taking the lore as like, we'll analyze it if it's like, this is how we're going to refer to it, as if it's a real thing. And you can do that because there's so much to work with. One of my favorite ones recently, shout out to Camelworks for his Apocrypha Hermaeus Mora, that it is a documentary. It is 5 hours long. And it's mesmerizing that there's that much material to work with. Like, if you really want to go full nerd and dig into it, there's enough there that you can do that, which that is hard to find fiction that you can really make that much of a deep dive into. So trying to catch up on that to then write a book to mimic, you know, the world and bring it into your story, that it would, if you're not already part of it, that is quite an undertaking to try to do, I'd imagine.
I will say that it amazes me how the content creators of the Elder Scrolls community are able to put out such long-form content. There are videos that you can find on YouTube that go into a deep introspective view of every single Elder Scrolls game, and some of these are like 12 hours long, that they just talk constantly about every little bit of each game, dissecting it and going and giving their opinions about how things were presented. And the series has a habit of pulling some very talented people into the community and be able to produce such quality works.
Yep, totally agreed. The other big thing, which I kind of just want to get the story to it, because in collection terms, for anybody on the video, you would be seeing this. You have, for lack of a better term, a big ass dragonborn behind you. What is the story with the statue? Because that is epic.
So that is one of the Dovahkiin statues that were produced to be able to market Skyrim when it first came out. There was around 300 of them created. Each of the Bethesda offices have one or two within them. And then the others were distributed to different GameStop locations that they promoted the series. It took me a long time to be able to find one to where the seller was willing to ship it to me, as most of the sellers didn't want to ship such a bulky item that's going to cost a lot in shipping. So they, with this statue, it actually came all the way from Florida out to California. It cost a lot in shipping, but it was well worth it to have it right there.
Just out of curiosity, what's it made out of?
It seems to be like a polyester. It's not stone or anything like that. It's not really plastic, but it has a good bulk to it.
Okay. Yeah, that one is definitely one of the most dramatic things in your collection. That I remember when you first showed me that, I was like, oh wow, that is huge. So yeah, I didn't want to have that get glossed over and not have that get brought up. And actually in chat it was brought up and people were like, oh my god, I didn't even realize that was a dragonborn. Yeah, totally is.
As you can see, I've decorated him with like the Greymore bag, and you can actually see a little netch on top of his head there that I've put. He's got his little mud crab next to him on his foot. And I have fun decorating him. But he's not even my rarest thing in my collection. That would actually be one of the Daggerfall letter openers, of which there's only two to exist. The one in my collection and then the one that's within Bethesda's home office.
That is very cool. So I guess for the sake of it, as we've been going for a while, I know you kind of have a hard out, and I want to just shout out, I also have an out. Personally, I'm going to want to have you back at some point because this was a lot of fun. And I appreciate getting some Imperial Library representation on the show. I personally just wanted to shout this out as well. I shouted it out on the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, but if you don't know Vanquish Guild, and Duck is my personal contact in there, who was polite enough to invite me, they do a fantastic representation of A Christmas Carol entirely done within game of ESO. It is absolutely phenomenal. So I'll be happy to be attending that in a moment. And if you have interest in this next year, I know that they're pretty much sold out of tickets for this year, as they can literally only limit how many people can go in an instance at the same time. Definitely look into it. It is phenomenal. I will be trying to post pictures afterwards so that people can see it, because they do an amazing job. So for this episode, we're just going to kind of skip over the Tales bit because of, I don't know, I really enjoyed this conversation more than storytelling stuff individually. But before we go, where can people find you, Benefactor? Because you, again, have been around this community for quite a while, and just in case anybody hasn't met you, where can they get a hold of you if they need you?
So you can contact me either on Twitter, it's at TESBenefactor. I'm also available, you can message me directly on the Imperial Library.info. And if you are on the UESB or the Imperial Library Discord, you can be able to message me directly there as well if you want to get in touch.
Awesome. And as for me, everybody kind of knows where I exist. Thank you, Benefactor, for joining me this week. This was a ton of fun. I'm glad that I got to discuss this stuff with a fellow collector, as well as weird esoteric game player who is actually even more experienced than I am with this. So this has been a lot of fun. As for me, the show is being recorded live for anybody interested over at my personal channel, LotusOfDoom on Twitch. But as for everything else, you can follow everything we do over at DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com. There you can find links to all of our social media, including Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Discord. Be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/DungeonCrawlerNetwork if you want to help support the show, and consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever the hell it's called nowadays, so that people know that we are a real podcast, that we do say real words, and sometimes they matter. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this live episode of Tales of Tamriel, and we will see you all next time.
When Akatosh slew Lorcan, he ripped his heart right out. He hurled it across Tamriel, and the heart was heard to shout, red diamond, the heart and soul of men. Red diamond, protect us till the end. The laughing heart sprayed blood afar, a gout on Seer it fell, and like a dart shot to its mark down in an alien well. Magicka fused the Lorcan blood to crystal red and strong. Then wild elves cut and polished it down to Chimel at a ball. Red diamond, the heart and soul of men. Red diamond, protect us till the end. When elves lost Nirn to men, Akatosh gave the stone to Saint Alesh in token of her right to sit the throne. Red diamond, the heart and soul of men. Red diamond, protect us till the end. Red diamond, protect us till the end.